Hi, boys and girls. We are going to continue to read The Thief of Always today. I'm just going to get my reader's notebook open so it is ready to go and we can figure out which chapter we're on. I believe we're on chapter 23, which means we only have 4 chapters left. Crazy. Crazy. And I need to kind of refresh my brain because I'll read a few chapters and then I'll read a few chapters after that the next day. Okay, so this is where, Harvey just asked Mr. Hood for his final wish, and, well, not necessarily a wish, but his final wish, and he said he wants all of the seasons at once. And Mr. Hood said, "Very well, I will give it to you, and when you have it, little thief, your soul is mine." So that's where we're picking up. Chapter 23, this is called The War of Seasons. Hood didn't waste any time. He'd no sooner made his final offer to Harvey than the balmy wind grew gusty, carrying off the lamb's wool clouds that had been drifting through the summer sky. In their place came a juggernaut, a thunderhead the size of a mountain, which loomed over the house like a shadow thrown against heaven. It had more than lightning at its dark heart. It had the light rains that came at early morning to coax forth the seeds of another spring. It had the drooping fogs of autumn and the spiraling snows that had brought so many midnight Christmases to the house. Now all 3 fell at once, rains, snows, and fogs, as a chilly sleet that all but covered the sun. It would have killed the flowers on the slope with cold, had the wind not reached them first, tearing through the blossoms with such vehemence, that every petal and leaf was snatched up into the air. Standing between this fragrant tide and the plummeting curtain of ice and cloud, Harvey was barely able to stay upright. So all this stuff is happening around him, and Harvey is just trying to stay upright and see what's happening around him. But he planted his feet wide apart and resisted every blast and buffet, determined not to take shelter. This spectacle might be the last he set eyes upon as a free spirit. Indeed, as a living spirit. He intended to enjoy it. So he's thinking there's a chance that he's about to die, or that after this, Mr. Hood's going to take his soul and he won't be living anymore. It was a sight to behold, a battle the likes of which the planet had never seen. To his left, shafts of sunlight pierced the storm clouds in the name of summer, only to be smothered by autumn's fogs. While to his right, spring coaxed its legions out of bough and earth, then saw its buds murdered by winter's frost before they could show their colors. Attack after attack was mounted and repulsed. Reveil and retreat sounded 100 times, but no one season was able to carry the day. It was soon impossible to distinguish defeats from victories. The rallies and the feints, the diversions and encirclements all became one confusion. Snows melted into rains as they fell. Rains were boiled into vapor and sweated new shoots out through the rot of their brothers. And somewhere in the midst of this chaos, the power that had brought it about raised its voice in a rage, demanding that it cease. "Enough!" the Hood house yelled. "Enough!" But its voice, which had once carried such terrible authority, had grown weak. Its orders went unnoticed, or if noticed, then disobeyed. The seasons raged on, throwing themselves against each other with rare abandon, and in passing, tearing at the house which stood in the midst of their battlefield. The walls, which had begun to teeter as Hood's power diminished, were thrown over by the raging wind. The chimneys were racked by thunder and toppled. The lightning rods struck so many times they melted and fell through the slateless roof in a burning rain, setting fire to every floorboard, banister, and stick of furniture they touched. The porch, pummeled by hail, was reduced to matchwood. The staircase, rocked to its foundations by the growth in the dirt around it, collapsed like a tower of cards. So this whole house is being destroyed right now because of all the seasons happening at once. That's why Mr. Hood was saying enough, because he knew that what Harvey wished for was going to be the end of him and the house and everything that it had to offer. Squinting against the face of the storm, Harvey witnessed all of this and rejoiced. He'd come to the house hoping to steal back the years that Hood had tricked from him, but he never dared believe he could bring the whole edifice down. Yet here it was, falling as he watched. Loud though the dins of wind and thunder were, they couldn't drown out the sound of the house as it perished and went to dust. Every nail and sill and brick seemed to shriek at once, a cry of pain that only oblivion could comfort. Harvey was denied a glimpse of Hood's last moments, meaning he didn't get to see the final moments of Mr. Hood being alive. A cloud of dirt rose like a veil to cover the sight, but he knew the moment his battle with the Vampire King was over, because the warring season suddenly turned to peace. The thunder had softened its furies and dispersed. The wind dropped to an idling breeze. The fierce sun grew watery and veiled itself in mist. There was debris in the air, of course, petals and leaves, dust and ash. They fell like a dream rain, though their fall marked the end of a dream. "Oh, child," said Mrs. Griffin. Harvey turned to her. She was standing just a few yards from him, gazing up at the sky. There was a little patch of blue above their heads, the first glimpse of real sky these few acres of ground had seen since Hood had founded his empire of illusions. But it was not the patch she was watching. It was a congregation of floating lights, the same that Harvey had seen freed by the collapse of the house. They were now moving in a steady stream toward the lake. "The children's souls," she said, her voice growing thinner as she spoke the word. "Beautiful." Her body was no longer solid, Harvey saw. She was fading away in front of him. "Oh no," he murmured. She took her eyes off the sky and stared down at her arms and the cat she was carrying in them. It too was growing insubstantial. "Look at us," said Mrs. Griffin with a smile upon her weary face. "It feels so wonderful." "But you're disappearing." "I've lingered here far too long, sweet boy," she said. There were tears glistening on her face, but they were tears of joy, not of sadness. "It's time to go." She kept stroking Stu Cat as they both faded from sight. "You are the brightest soul I ever met, Harvey Swick," she said. "Keep shining, won't you?" Harvey wished he had some words to persuade her to stay a little while longer. But even if he'd had such words, he knew it would have been selfish to speak them. Mrs. Griffin had another life to go to, where every soul shine. "Goodbye, child," she said. "Wherever I go, I will speak of you with love." Then her ghostly form flickered out, leaving Harvey alone in the ruins. And that is the end of chapter 23. Okay, so a lot of things just happened. So let's kind of reflect on this. Okay, so today I kind of want to just talk about what has happened to this setting. And this setting was so imperative and so important to Harvey developing as a character and changing his motivations and changing how he behaves and kind of seeing these new character traits come to light with him. And this holiday house has now been destroyed. Mr. Hood is now gone. And so this kind of gives us a time to kind of reflect back on what all Harvey has done. And it kind of gives us some hope for the future. Though Mrs. Griffin did just die and Stu Cat went with her, we have a lot to kind of look forward to. So after Mrs. Griffin was freed, Mrs. Griffin was freed from the coffin a while back, a few chapters ago, I now have said that she has died after the holiday house was destroyed because she's so old. She's very old. And I'm going to say, and Stu Cat died too. And then I previously said that Mr. Hood is still alive, and I was saying that he had been feeding off of Harvey, and because he said that Harvey had the brightest soul he'd ever met. So that was kind of feeding him to keep this holiday house alive. But I now said that the Mr. Hood and the holiday house are gone. And it was destroyed by all of the seasons. And this was a wish made by Harvey. So Harvey has now saved the day. So now I'm going to kind of add that our last point is that, how did he describe this? I'm talking about the lights that were going towards that were coming from the lake, coming towards the lakes. The floating lights. Okay. So I'm going to say floating lights released from the holiday house back to the lake. So I'm making a prediction that this is going to lead, I already actually made this prediction. I predict that the lights will bring back Lulu, Wendell, and all the other kids who had their lives or souls taken. Now, the only other thing that I'm nervous about is that we haven't really heard from Rictus. Rictus did not die at this point, up until this point. So I'm a little nervous about that. So something that I'm thinking is that Rictus, you would think that because Mrs. Griffin died because she was so old, no one else that was one of Mr. Hood's servants is no longer alive, but Rictus apparently. And I'm thinking if this holiday house has been destroyed, shouldn't Rictus be dead? So I'm just going to make another little prediction, and I'm going to predict that Rictus cannot stay alive because the holiday house no longer exists. And I feel like this is going to be the only problem left for Harvey. Because I'm thinking we only have a few more chapters. What else could get in Harvey's way? I mean, the holiday house and Mr. Hood were the ones that were causing these big issues for Harvey. I don't see how there could be anything else besides Rictus possibly giving him issues. So when we come back, we will continue on with chapter 24. Are we on 24 or can I not count? Okay, so 24. All right, hope you enjoyed it.